Hey everyone, welcome to this short series about test automation. In this short video, we'll start off by introducing the test automation concept, what are the different pre-requirements in order to start the automation process itself, and then we will finish up with a small demo to see and to showcase how this can be used in real life. Alright, so let's start off by opening UiPath Studio. Of course, this is a prerequisite, you at least need to have UiPath Studio, but it goes without saying anyways. So once you open UiPath Studio, you will have your different templates where you could choose from. So for us, we can start off by selecting the test automation framework. This will allow us to have the packages and all the requirements already pre-installed. Let's call this test demo. Okay. So again, keep in mind, if you already have an existing process and you want to add a few testing features to it, this will be more or less the same steps. So all you'd have to do is first of all go to the different packages, and depending on the version you'll be working with on Studio, you will have this specific package downloaded for the test automation activities. Of course, if you have later versions of Studio, you can always upgrade to the latest versions. If you don't, previous versions work as well. Okay. Once we made sure that this pre-requirement is a vital step for our test automation journey, we will have a look at the different features that this package allows us to have. So what we will do is go to the activities panel and look up test. And here we will have all the different testing activities provided within this specific package. So this dependencies, of course, will allow us to have access to these. If you want to make sure just as quickly without having to open the package with the package window, you can just check right here if you have the UiPath testing activities with the appropriate version that goes with it. For our case, we're currently working with the 24.10. So in that case, let's quickly have a look at what are these specific activities. Okay, let's just quickly go to the test case. Here we go. So of course, since we are using the template provided by UiPath, you will have the given when structure. So the given when then is simply a template for us to start our testing journey. The given will be all the prerequisites for a specific process that we want to test. The when will be the targeted process, and finally the then is going to be the output testing to validate or not the specific test case. So to give a few examples, this should be more or less the init state of your specific process. This will be the targeted process that you want to test. And finally, these are the verification points just to make sure that your test is a successful one. All right, with that in mind, let's have a quick look at the different testing activities that are currently provided. So if we have a look, the first thing is data activities. So these data activities are simply there to create random data for your testing needs. So if you want to consider this, if you want to create random names, addresses, numbers, and so on, these are all going to be available to you via these specific activities. You can customize them to your specific needs. And then we'll move on to the different testing queues. So this is the testing management queue items specifically dedicated for the testing purposes. So much like the the queues in the process automation, you will have testing queues for your processes that are going to be tested. Of course, you will have the add test queue, the bulk add, the delete, the get data item, and data items, of course, one and multiple. And finally, we get to the most important section of it. Since I'm using an earlier version of this package, we will have the 4 verification activities. For these 4, I will have the verify with control attribute, expression with operator, and finally the verify range. So let's have a look at each one of these, and then we will see them in real life in a quick POC. So it's a small proof of concept. Okay. Now let's have a look for the first one. This is verify controller with verify activity with a control attribute. This will simply allow us to invoke an activity directly and check its output to a specific output again. So let's take the classic activities and let's look for element exist. Okay. So whenever we're going to be using the element exist, as we all know, the output is going to be a true or false. So in this case, the output of this specific activity will be inherited, and you can directly match it here to say whether it's a true or a false. And this will be our simple, sorry, misspelled true. There we go. So again, this simple activity, you call another activity or sub-process, and you make sure that the specific output will match what here we'll be specifying in this specific expression. Now, with that in mind, what we're going to be doing is checking the properties for this specific verification activity. In this one, we can just mention whether or not we want to continue on our failure, verify the different expression and the different operators, whether it's an inequality or not, take a screenshot if it's a success or a failure. Usually I specify both of them at true. This way I always have a screenshot whether it's a pass or a failure. It's helpful once you're trying to debug why a specific test case is failing. You can have alternative messages for both the title and the output of the format. So if you want to have something that will check for a specific UI or specific location within a screen, you will have to add a new title, and this will be displayed within your assertion later on, either with the test manager or in the orchestrated testing tab. Now, with that in mind, since this is a simple testing activity, we can always retrieve the output. So if it's a success or a failure, and all of these properties will be more or less the same within each verification activity. So now that you have done this one, let's move on to the next one. Again, we will take the same kind of properties, whether we want to continue on the error or not. Simply, this is going to be useful if your specific the specific verification that you're going to be doing is crucial or not. So if it's not crucial and just want to make sure that a variable or something is properly displayed and you can actually continue on with your process without having it to be a blocking point, you can always just ignore it and continue on with your testing. So you can select to take a screenshot if it fails or if it's a success. Again, this is a possibility depending on your specific need. If you're just wanting to test a specific scenario and you don't need a screenshot if it's a pass, you can just always ignore it and you will have a small message depending on what you specified right here. Same goes for the output. Now moving on to the verify expression with an operator, again, same logic applies. You will just have to select what kind of operator you want to be using with the first expression and the second expression. Again, this is depending on your specific needs, the business requirement, and so on. And finally, we will have the verify range. Verify range will be based on a specific expression. Verification tab, whether it's within or if it's not within a specific range, and you can specify the lower limit and the higher limit of that specific verification. Again, the inputs or the verification, the properties panel for this specific verification activities is more or less as the same previous for. Now, since we'll have a global idea of what are the different pre-requirements and what are the different verification points that we can apply to a specific process, how about we have a look at a real case scenario? Let's open a project that I already have done, and let's have a look at that process that I want to be testing. Okay, so I'm using the UI Bank as a testing website, and let's go first about the processes themselves. So the processes, there's going to be two sub-processes, very simple ones, just for a quick example. This one is to start off by applying for a loan. So to apply for a loan, all I need to do is open a specific URL, which will guide me to the web page for application, application for a loan, and then I will have a specific form. In that specific form, I will be just filling up the different data in it and finally applying for one. As for the UI Bank apply loan form extraction, this is where I'm going to be retrieving whether it's a success or a failure, simply by having the specific window that states you have been successfully granted a specific loan or that you have been rejected for this specific loan. The main idea is to extract the ID and the APR, as well as the rejection code if there is one. So this is a very quick high level of what our process is going to be doing. So for my specific test case, but before we go into the specific test case, let's have a look at the use case when it's not being tested. So what I would be doing, for instance, is applying the activity to read the data that I want to be applying for the specific test case, which was a rather linear one. Then we will move on to iterating through each line of our specific so since this is an Excel sheet, we will have each row to iterate through and simply applying the new form request and finally retrieving the data. Now, this is the simple use case, and here we will have an exception that has been taken care of in our specific testing. So for specific testing, like I said, what are the pre-requirements for this loan application? Since we don't have any, it can be blank. So we won't do anything there. My targeted process is the form application. So this is what I want to be testing, whether or not I have properly filled up the form. And for the verify expression, since I don't want to go with details within this process, I want to check whether or not we have reached the next point. Since if we have an exception in that specific process, it will just be blocked. Now, if I do actually have a successful process, it will just state here that there is a true, which is again just a simple verification. A screenshot, of course, and we have just changed the title and message to match that we are currently finished with the form. Moving on to the data extraction, this is where we want to be a little bit more creative. Here as an output, what I have is the loan, the ID, and the rejection message. In order for me to test whether or not this has been a successful test, I will just, again, keep it very simple, make a simple if statement. So this if is going to state whether my rejection message is empty or if it's not. So if it's not empty, this means there has been an error. If it's empty, then it should be successful. In that case, my verification activity right here would just state if the ID and the APR are not empty. Again, these are very simple verifications since we want to keep it very simple to showcase that this is currently working. Then the same will be applied for the rejection message. If I do have a rejection message, I should not have an ID, neither should I have an APR. So let's have a look at how it's currently being run. Let's remove this. Let's check if we have, here we go, and let's just run it. Let's run it in debug mode. Again, the process, simple, fill up a form, verify that the application has passed. If it has passed, we should have an ID as well as an APR. Okay, it opened on the other window. Here we go. So now we're just applying for a simple loan. And there we go. So this should be a rather successful one. And here, as you can see, we have been approved for a loan within the UI bank. And if we go back to our studio right now, we should have the Test Explorer results. So if I go back to my test case, this is the specific data I've been testing with, and as you can see, it's a success and the form has been completely done. So this again is just a simple POC, and we will be just doing more of these across this automation short video of how we can actually create a test project, how we can evolve from making very simple test cases to very complex ones, and I will just keep making these short videos for us to keep growing together as well as having more useful use cases. For next session, I will be moving on to how to link the orchestrator and the test manager to a specific studio and how to publish these and start working with them. So please stay tuned and I will keep you posted on every new video that I will be posting. See you guys.